The massive colony ship New Horizon drifted through the cold darkness of space like a metal island carrying dreams and hopes. Inside its metal walls, 50,000 humans lived and worked as they traveled toward their new home on a distant planet. The ship had been their world for 3 years now, and would be for 2 more years until they reached Kepler-442b. Danny Martinez pressed his small face against the thick viewing window in the observation deck. The 8-year-old boy watched the stars dance past like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. His brown eyes were wide with wonder as he counted the bright points of light. His mother Maria had taught him that each star might have planets with people living on them. "Danny, come eat your lunch," called his father Carlos from across the deck. Carlos worked as a maintenance engineer on the ship. He fixed the machines that kept everyone alive during their long journey. Maria worked in the ship's school, teaching the other children about Earth and the new world they would call home. The boy ran to his parents with his arms spread wide like he was flying. He crashed into his father's legs and laughed. Carlos picked up his son and spun him around. Maria smiled as she watched them play. They were a happy family looking forward to starting a farm on their new planet. Captain Lisa Johnson stood on the bridge watching her crew work at their stations. She had been the captain of New Horizon for 15 years. She knew every sound the ship made and every light on every control panel. Today something felt wrong. The ship's engines were making a noise they should not make. "Captain, we have a problem," said engineer Pete Wilson as he looked at his screens. "The main drive is overheating. If we don't stop soon, it might explode." Lisa felt ice in her stomach. An engine explosion would kill everyone on the ship. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before it gets too dangerous," Pete answered. Lisa looked at the star map on her screen. They were close to the border of Zephyrian space. The Zephyrians were tall, gray-skinned aliens who controlled a large part of this area of the galaxy. They did not like other species entering their territory. But Lisa had no choice. "Take us into Zephyrian space," she ordered. "Find the nearest safe place to stop for repairs." The crew worked quickly to change course. Everyone on the ship knew about the Zephyrians. They were proud warriors who thought they were better than all other species in the galaxy. They had rules about their territory that they never bent for anyone. Down in the family quarters, Danny was playing with his toy spaceship when the ship's speakers came to life. "Attention all passengers. We are making an emergency stop for engine repairs. Please remain calm and stay in your quarters until further notice." Danny looked at his parents. "Are we in trouble, Dad?" Carlos put his hand on his son's shoulder. "No, son. The ship just needs to be fixed. We'll be fine." But Carlos felt worried. He had heard stories about what happened to ships that entered Zephyrian space without permission. The Zephyrians did not care about emergencies or accidents. They only cared about their laws. 2 hours later, the ship's alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed in the hallways. On the bridge, Captain Johnson watched her screens as 3 large Zephyrian warships surrounded New Horizon. The alien ships were dark and covered with weapons. They looked like metal sharks in the water. "This is Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet," came a cold voice over the radio. "You have entered sacred Zephyrian space without permission. Prepare to be boarded," Lisa tried to explain. "Commander, this is Captain Johnson of the human colony ship New Horizon. We have an engine emergency and need to make repairs. We mean no harm and will leave as soon as our repairs are complete." "Your reasons do not matter," Veltar replied. "You have broken our laws. You will face judgment." The Zephyrian boarding shuttles attached to New Horizon like metal leeches. Armed Zephyrian soldiers marched through the ship's hallways. They were 7 feet tall with gray skin and black eyes. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Commander Veltar stepped onto the bridge. He looked at the humans with disgust. His voice was like ice when he spoke. "Humans, you primitive creatures think you can go anywhere you want in the galaxy. Today you learn the price of your arrogance." "We had an emergency," Lisa said, trying to stay calm. "Our engines were going to explode. We had no choice but to enter your space." Veltar walked around the bridge, looking at the human crew like they were insects. Your emergency is not our concern. You have violated sacred Zephyrian territory. Under our law, this crime is punishable by death. The human crew stepped back in fear. Death for an emergency stop seemed impossible to believe. However, Veltar continued, we are not without mercy. The punishment must fit the crime. You brought your breeding stock into our space. Therefore, one of your spawn must pay the price. Lisa's blood turned to ice. Spawn? You mean our children? Yes, one human. Child will die as an example to your species and all others who think they can ignore Zephyrian law. No, Lisa stepped forward. Take me instead. I'm the captain. The responsibility is mine. Veltar smiled, showing sharp teeth. The law is clear. A child must die to teach your kind respect. The Zephyrian soldiers moved through the ship, scanning their computers for information about the human families. They found the records of all the children on board. There were 300 kids ranging from babies to teenagers dotting their quarters. Danny was building a fort out of pillows when the door burst open. 3 Zephyrian soldiers entered, their weapons ready. Carlos jumped in front of his family, but the aliens pushed him aside easily. The child Danny Martinez will come with us, one soldier said in broken human language. No, Maria screamed as she grabbed her son. He's just a baby, please. The soldiers pulled Danny away from his mother. The boy started to cry as the strange aliens carried him down the hallway. Mom, Dad, help me. Carlos tried to follow, but more Zephyrian soldiers blocked his way. He could only watch as his son disappeared around a corner. Maria collapsed to her knees, sobbing all through the ship. Families watched in horror as the Zephyrian soldiers took Danny away. Captain Johnson followed the soldiers, begging them to take her instead, but Veltar would not listen. The child has been chosen, he said. Justice will be served according to Zephyrian law. Your species will learn respect. Danny was brought to the Zephyrian flagship. The scared 8-year-old boy found himself in a cold metal room surrounded by tall gray aliens. He asked for his parents, but no one answered him in words he could understand. Commander Veltar looked down at the small human child. In his mind, this was justice. The humans would learn that Zephyrian space was sacred. Other species would see what happened to those who broke their laws, but Veltar had made a mistake that would cost his entire empire. He had chosen to hurt a human child, and humanity would never forgive that choice. Commander Veltar stood in his ship's communication center, watching his crew prepare the galaxy-wide broadcast system. The Zephyrian Empire controlled the largest network of communication relays in known space. When they wanted to send a message, every civilized world would receive it. Commander, the broadcast system is ready, reported his communication officer. We can reach over 4 billion worlds and space stations. Veltar nodded with satisfaction. This would be the greatest teaching moment in galactic history. Every species would see what happened when they challenged Zephyrian authority. The death of one human child would prevent future conflicts and save millions of lives on Earth. It was early morning when the emergency broadcast signal interrupted every television, radio, and computer screen on the planet. President Helen Carter was eating breakfast when her security chief burst into her private dining room. Madam President, you need to see this immediately, said Agent Brown. His face pale with worry. In homes across Earth, families stopped what they were doing as alien faces appeared on their screens. The Zephyrian tribunal looked like gray demons with their black eyes and sharp teeth. Behind them stood a small human boy with tears running down his face. Admiral Jack Morrison was in his office at Space Command when the broadcast began. The tough old soldier had fought in 3 wars and seen terrible things, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. This is Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. The alien's cold voice filled billions of homes. Today, we demonstrate the price of defying Zephyrian law. The human vessel New Horizon violated our sacred territory. According to our ancient laws, death is the punishment for this crime. Danny Martinez stood in the center of the alien courtroom, looking smaller than his 8 years. His brown hair was messy and his clothes were wrinkled from sleeping on the cold metal floor. He kept looking around, hoping to see his parents somewhere, on New Horizon. Carlos and Maria Martinez were held in their quarters by Zephyrian guards. They could do nothing but watch as their son appeared on the screen. Maria sobbed uncontrollably while Carlos pounded his fists against the metal door. However, Veltar continued, we are not without mercy. The humans brought their young into our space. Therefore, their young must pay the price. This child will die so that all species remember to respect Zephyrian authority. Across the galaxy, billions of creatures watched in shock. On the trading world of Nexus Prime, alien merchants stopped their business to stare at their screens. On the peaceful planet Harmony, the butterfly-like melons wept for the human child. Even species that had never met humans felt sick watching. The scene, President Carter stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her top advisors. General Patricia Lewis, Secretary of Defense, stood with her hands clenched into fists. Madam President, we have to do something. What can we do? Carter replied, her voice breaking. Our nearest warship is 6 months away from that location. The Zephyrian Tribunal began their formal judgment. 3 alien judges took turns explaining why Danny must die. They spoke in cold, legal terms about territory violation and species hierarchy. To them, the boy was not a person, but a symbol. Danny finally found his voice. I want to talk to my mom and dad, he said in a small, scared voice. One of the Zephyrian judges looked down at him with something that might have been pity. Your parents cannot help you now, human child. You will die to teach your species respect. But I didn't do anything bad, Danny said, tears streaming down his face. I was just playing with my toy spaceship. The judge's expression did not change. Your individual actions do not matter. You represent your species. Your death will prevent greater suffering. Around the galaxy, the broadcast was being watched by species that had their own conflicts with the Zephyrian Empire. The proud Coraxians, who had lost 3 colonies to Zephyrian expansion, watched with growing anger. The peaceful Valdorians, who had been forced to pay tribute to Zephyrian overlords, felt their first stirrings of rebellion, but nowhere was the reaction stronger than on Earth, and in human colonies throughout space. On Mars, construction workers stopped building and stared at the screens in their break rooms. On the space station Europa base, scientists abandoned their experiments to watch in horror. Every human ship, station, and settlement received the signal. Dr. Susan Wright was in her secret laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains when the broadcast reached her. She led Earth's most classified weapons program, developing technology that the general public knew nothing about. As she watched the alien tribunal prepare to murder a human child, her mind began working on a very different kind of problem. Sir, are you seeing this? Asked her assistant, pointing at the wall screen. Yes, Wright replied quietly. And I'm thinking about what we're going to do about it. The Zephyrian executioner stepped forward. He was larger than the others, carrying a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. The device was designed to cause maximum pain before death, as a lesson to anyone watching. Danny looked up at the huge alien and asked, "Will it hurt?" The executioner paused for a moment. Even among the harsh Zephyrians, there were some who felt uncomfortable killing children, but duty was duty. It will be quick, he lied. Danny nodded and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He stood as straight as his small body could manage. Please don't hurt my mom and dad. They didn't do anything wrong either. Those words echoed across the galaxy. On Earth, Admiral Morrison felt something break inside his chest. He had been a soldier for 40 years, but he had never heard such courage from someone so young. The boy looked directly into the camera, speaking to his parents and to all of humanity. Mom, Dad, I love you. Don't be sad. I'm not scared anymore. Then Danny did something that would be remembered for generations. He looked at his executioner and said, I forgive you. I know you think you have to do this. The Zephyrian executioner hesitated. In all his years of carrying out sentences, no one had ever spoken to him with such kindness. But Commander Veltar was watching, and the law was clear. The energy weapon fired. Danny Martinez fell to the metal floor of the alien ship. The galaxy watched as an 8-year-old boy died for the crime of being human in the wrong place. The broadcast ended with Commander Veltar's final warning. This is the price of defying Zephyrian authority. Let all species learn from this lesson. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of crying from a billion worlds. But on Earth, something else was building. In the White House, President Carter looked around the Situation Room at her advisors. Their faces showed a mixture of grief and rage that would reshape the galaxy. "Get me every military commander we have," she said quietly. "Get me the heads of every defense contractor. Get me everyone who has ever designed a weapon or built a warship." "Madam President?" asked General Lewis. Carter's eyes were hard as steel when she replied. "They just declared war on every child in human space. We're going to show them what that means." Across Earth and throughout human colonies, the same transformation was taking place. Humanity had just watched one of their children die for the entertainment of aliens. The protective instinct that had helped humans survive for millions of years was now focused on a single goal. The Zephyrian Empire had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They had shown humanity what they really thought of human life, and humanity would never forget. President Helen Carter stood before the emergency joint session of the Global Parliament. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered within 6 hours of Danny Martinez's execution. The great hall was silent as she walked to the podium. Her face showed a calm that frightened even her closest allies. "Fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall and to every human settlement in space. "Yesterday we learned what our place is supposed to be in this galaxy. We are supposed to be quiet. We are supposed to accept whatever treatment the older species give us. We are supposed to watch our children die and call it justice." She paused, letting her words sink in. In the audience, hardened politicians and military leaders sat with tears in their eyes. "I reject this place they have chosen for us," Carter continued. "The Zephyrian Empire has declared war on human children. We accept their declaration. But they will learn that humans do not fight wars the way other species do. We fight them to win." Admiral Jack Morrison watched the speech from his command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Around him, screens showed the positions of every human ship, station, and colony in known space. For the first time in his career, every single human military unit was reporting ready for action. "Admiral," said Colonel Betty Kane, his chief of staff, "we're receiving authorization codes from the President. She's activating Protocol 7. Morrison nodded grimly. Protocol 7 was humanity's deepest secret. For 200 years, while other species saw humans as peaceful traders and explorers, Earth had been preparing for this day. The day when humanity would have to fight for its survival. Hidden shipyards throughout the solar system began powering up. On the dark side of the moon, massive doors opened in what appeared to be empty craters. Inside were construction facilities that had been building warships in secret for decades. The ships looked like merchant vessels on the outside, but they carried enough weapons to destroy entire fleets. Dr. Susan Wright received her orders in her underground laboratory. The weapons she had spent 20 years developing were no longer theoretical projects. They were about to become reality. Her team began preparing devices that would change the nature of warfare itself. "Doctor," said her assistant as he looked at the activation codes on his screen, "these are weapons we swore we would never use." Right. Looked at the photograph on her desk. It showed her own daughter, who was the same age as Danny Martinez. "We swore we would never use them against humans," she replied. "The Zephyrians are not human." In space stations throughout human territory, civilians began evacuating to Earth and the heavily defended core worlds. But many chose to stay and fight. Merchant captains opened secret weapon compartments in their ships. Mining crews turned their industrial equipment into tools of war. Humanity was transforming itself from a peaceful species into something else entirely. Captain Steve Rodriguez commanded the stealth ship Ghostwalker, one of humanity's most advanced vessels. His ship could move through space undetected by any known technology. He received his orders directly from Admiral Morrison, locate the Zephyrian fleet that had killed Danny Martinez. Captain, said his sensor operator as they approached the border of Zephyrian space, I'm detecting the New Horizon. It's being escorted by 3 Zephyrian warships. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The aliens were taking the human colony ship to a prison world where the passengers would spend the rest of their lives as slaves. Lock weapons on the escort ships. We're going to give those families some good news. The Ghostwalker struck without warning. The Zephyrian ships never saw the attack coming. One moment they were escorting their prizes, the next moment they were floating debris. The human stealth ship appeared next to New Horizon like a guardian angel. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force, he broadcast to the colony. Ship, you are now under our protection. We're taking you home. On the bridge of New Horizon, Captain Lisa Johnson watched the rescue ships arrive. Behind them came medical vessels and support craft. But she knew this was just the beginning. Humanity was going to war, and everyone knew that wars changed the people who fought them. Carlos and Maria Martinez were reunited with their son's body. When the rescue ships docked, they held each other and cried for the boy who would never see his new home. But their grief was mixed with something else. They wanted the aliens who had killed Danny to pay for what they had done, back on Earth. The transformation of human society was happening at incredible speed. Factories that had made civilian goods began producing weapons and ammunition. Schools started teaching children about war and survival. The peaceful civilization that had explored the stars for 3 centuries was becoming something harder and more dangerous. The Zephyrian Empire received reports of the rescue operation with confusion. Their intelligence services had always described humans as weak and divided. How had they managed to coordinate such a complex mission so quickly? Commander Veltar was in his quarters when the reports reached him. He dismissed them as exaggerations. Humans were primitive creatures who could barely manage to build working starships. They posed no real threat to the mighty Zephyrian Empire, but other Zephyrian commanders were not so confident. General Kakstar, the Empire's chief military strategist, studied the reports with growing concern. The humans had destroyed 3 warships, without taking any damage. Their stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone had suspected. Commander Veltar, he said during an emergency meeting of the Zephyrian High Command, perhaps we should consider diplomatic contact with the humans. They may be more dangerous than we thought, Veltar laughed coldly. Diplomacy? We just taught them their place in the galaxy. If they want to throw more of their ships at us, let them come. We will destroy them all. Unknown to the Zephyrians, human intelligence services were already deep inside their communication networks. Every message, every order, every plan was being intercepted and analyzed. Humanity had spent centuries learning about their galactic neighbors. Now that knowledge would be used for war. Lieutenant Commander Janet Powell worked in the most secret facility on Earth. Her job was to hack into alien computer systems and steal their military secrets. She had just broken into the Zephyrian defense network and found something very interesting. Admiral Morrison, she reported over the secure channel. I've found the location of their main military headquarters. It's a space station called Empire's Fist in the Vega system. Morrison studied the intelligence data on his screen. Empire's Fist was the nerve center of Zephyrian military power. If it was destroyed, their entire empire would be thrown into chaos. How many ships are guarding it? He asked. Over 300 warships, sir? It's the most heavily defended target in their space. Morrison smiled for the first time since Danny's execution. Then that's where we're going to hit them first. The Admiral opened a secure channel to Dr. Wright's laboratory. Doctor, how soon can you have the Nova weapons ready for field testing? Wright looked at her team of scientists and engineers. They had been working around the clock for the past week, preparing humanity's most terrible weapons for use against the aliens who had killed a human child. Give us 72 hours, Admiral. The Zephyrians are about to learn what happens when you threaten human children. Across human space, the war machine was reaching full power. Ships that had been hidden for decades emerged from secret bases. Weapons that existed only in classified files became reality. Soldiers who had trained for a war they hoped would never come prepared for their first battles. But the most important change was in the hearts and minds of humanity itself. The species that had spread across the galaxy as explorers and traders was remembering why they had survived on a hostile world for millions of years. They were predators, and someone had just threatened their young. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled their part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species and crushed every rebellion. They believed they were unstoppable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 6 months after Danny Martinez died, the first human battle fleet entered Zephyrian space. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earthship Vengeance, watching as his ships moved into attack formation. Behind him stretched the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. The fleet did not look like anything the galaxy had seen before. Human ships were dark and angular, built for war rather than show. They moved through space like wolves, hunting prey, silent and deadly. Each vessel carried weapons that had been designed specifically to kill Zephyrians. "Admiral," reported Captain Steve Adams from his position aboard the destroyer Lightning Strike. "We're detecting the Zephyrian Border Patrol. 12 ships, standard formation." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were larger than the human vessels, but they had been built to fight enemies who followed the traditional rules of galactic warfare. They expected their opponents to announce themselves, demand surrender, and fight honorably. Humans had different ideas about honor. "All ships," Morrison ordered. "Execute Battle Plan Alpha. Show them what we learned from watching them kill our children." The human fleet struck without warning. Missiles launched from ships that the Zephyrians could not even see on their sensors. Energy weapons designed to overload Zephyrian shields tore through their defenses like they were made of paper. In less than 10 minutes, 12 Zephyrian warships were floating debris. Not a single human ship had been damaged. The surviving Zephyrian crews were rescued and brought aboard human vessels. They expected to be tortured or killed as they would have done to human prisoners. Instead, they were given medical treatment and food. Then they were shown recordings of Danny Martinez's execution. "This is why we are here," Captain Adams told the captured Zephyrian officers. "You murdered a child on live television. Now you will learn what that means." The news of the Border Patrol's destruction reached the Zephyrian High Command within hours. General Caxstar studied the battle reports with growing alarm. The humans had not just won the fight. They had won it without taking any casualties at all. "How is this possible?" demanded Emperor Zarthak, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire. "Our intelligence report said humans were primitive and weak." Caxstar looked at his screens showing the movement of human fleets throughout their territory. "Your Majesty, our intelligence was wrong. The humans have been hiding their true military capabilities for centuries. They are not primitive at all." The Emperor's black eyes narrowed with anger. "Then we will crush them with overwhelming force. Send the 3rd Battle Fleet to destroy these human insects." The 3rd Battle Fleet was the pride of the Zephyrian military. 50 of their most powerful warships, led by Admiral Hexstar, moved to intercept the human invasion force. The Zephyrian commander was confident that superior numbers would win the day. He was about to learn his first lesson about human warfare. The two fleets met near the dead world of Korvax Prime. The Zephyrians formed up in their traditional battle line, weapons charged and shields at maximum power. They sent the ritual challenge to their enemies, demanding surrender or honorable combat. The humans responded by firing every weapon they had at the same time. Dr. Wright's Nova weapons hit the Zephyrian flagship first. The terrible devices used? The aliens' own shield generators against them, turning their defenses into bombs. The ship exploded in a ball of white fire that blinded sensors throughout the system. The rest of the human fleet moved through the Zephyrian formation like sharks, in a feeding frenzy. Their weapons had been designed after studying captured Zephyrian technology. Every shot was aimed at a specific weakness in alien armor or shields. Admiral Hexstar watched his proud fleet being torn apart and could not understand how it was happening. His ships outnumbered the humans, his weapons were more powerful, his crews were more experienced. But nothing worked against the human attack. All ships retreat, he ordered, abandoning any thought of victory. Fall back to Empire's fist. But the humans were not finished. As the surviving Zephyrian ships tried to escape, human boarding craft attached to their hulls like metal leeches. Human soldiers cut through the alien ships' armor and fought their way inside. The Zephyrians had never faced enemies who fought the way humans did. In space, humans used technology and tactics. In close combat, they used something much older and more frightening. They used the fury of a species that had evolved from predators. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Hayes led the assault team that captured Admiral Hexstar's flagship. Her soldiers moved through the alien ship's corridors like they had been born for war. They showed no mercy to enemies who had cheered when a human child died. "Admiral," she said, as she found Hexstar hiding in his command center, "you are now a prisoner of the Human Defense Force. You will be tried for war crimes against children." Hexstar looked at the human soldiers surrounding him. They were smaller than Zephyrians, but there was something in their eyes that terrified him. These creatures had come across space to seek revenge for one dead child. What kind of species did that? The captured Zephyrian ships were taken to human bases where their technology was studied and copied. Human engineers learned how to improve their own weapons by examining alien designs. Every battle made humanity stronger and more dangerous. News of the Third Fleet's destruction caused panic throughout the Zephyrian Empire. Their most powerful military force had been crushed by enemies they had thought were harmless. If humans could do this, what else were they capable of? Emperor Zarthak called for aid from the Empire's allies. Surely other species would help them fight against the human menace. But the response was not what he expected. The Coraxians, who had lost colonies to Zephyrian expansion, refused to help. The Valdorians, who paid tribute to Zephyrian overlords, declared neutrality. Even the Melkari, longtime allies of the Empire, said they were too busy with internal problems to send military aid. The truth was that most of the galaxy had watched Danny Martinez die and been disgusted by Zephyrian cruelty. They had no desire to help the Empire fight against human justice. Some species went further than neutrality. The Coraxian government secretly began selling weapons and supplies to human forces. The Valdorians provided safe passage for human ships through their territory. Even the peaceful Melons offered to treat human wounded in their hospitals. Commander Veltar, the officer who had ordered Danny's execution, found himself hunted by a special human unit led by Colonel Betty Kane. Her team's only mission was to capture the aliens responsible for the boy's death and bring them to trial. "Colonel," reported her intelligence officer as they studied their target, "Veltar is hiding on the fortress world of Grimtar. It's protected by the Empire's most elite guards." Kane looked at the tactical data showing the fortress's defenses. Massive energy shields, hundreds of gun towers, underground bunkers that could withstand planet-killing weapons. It looked impossible to assault. "Then we don't assault it," she said with a cold smile. "We do something they won't expect." 3 days later, a single human transport ship approached Grimtar. It appeared to be a diplomatic vessel carrying a message of surrender from Earth. The Zephyrian defenders allowed it to land, eager to hear humanity's admission of defeat. Instead, the ship carried 50 human soldiers equipped with Dr. Wright's newest weapons. They fought their way through the fortress defenses with equipment that seemed to come from a nightmare. Zephyrian weapons could not penetrate their armor. Zephyrian shields could not stop their attacks. Commander Veltar was dragged from his hiding place and brought face to face with Colonel Kane, the alien who had seemed so powerful when ordering a child's death, now cowered before a human soldier half his size. "Commander Veltar," Kane said quietly, "you are under arrest for the murder of Danny Martinez. You will stand trial before a human court for crimes against humanity." As human forces pushed deeper into Zephyrian space, the Empire's military began to collapse. Ships deserted their posts. Soldiers refused to fight enemies who seemed impossible to defeat. Entire star systems declared independence rather than face human wrath. The war was not even a year old, But the outcome was already clear. The Zephyrian Empire was dying, killed by its own cruelty and humanity's response to that cruelty. Emperor Zartheg sat in his palace on the imperial homeworld, reading reports of defeat after defeat. His 1,000-year-old empire was falling apart because of one dead human child. How had it come to this? Outside his windows, he could see human ships in orbit around his planet. They had come to finish what the Zephyrians had started when they decided to teach humanity a lesson about power. The lesson was almost over, and only one species had learned anything from it. 1 year and 17 days after Danny Martinez died, Emperor Zarthek of the Zephyrian Empire stood in the ruins of his throne room. The great palace that had been the center of galactic power for 1,000 years was now a broken shell. Human warships floated in the sky above like metal vultures waiting for death. Admiral Morrison walked through the palace doors, flanked by human soldiers. He looked at the alien emperor who had once ruled over billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Now Zarthak was just a frightened old creature hiding in the wreckage of his empire. "Your Majesty," Morrison said with cold politeness, "I bring terms of surrender from the government of Earth." Zarthak's hands shook as he took the document. The terms were simple and final. The Zephyrian Empire would surrender unconditionally. All military forces would lay down their weapons. War criminals would be handed over for trial. The Empire's government would be dissolved forever. And if I refuse? The Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. Morrison gestured toward the windows where human ships waited. "Then we finish what you started when you decided to murder our children on live television." The Emperor signed the surrender document with a hand that trembled like a leaf in the wind. As he wrote his name, he was ending not just a war but an entire civilization. The Zephyrian Empire died with the scratching of his pen on paper. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The mighty empire that had dominated this part of space for centuries had fallen to humanity in less than 2 years. Species that had lived in fear of Zephyrian power suddenly found themselves free. On the world of Corax Prime, crowds gathered in the streets to celebrate. The Coraxians had lost 3 colony worlds to Zephyrian expansion over the past century. Now they cheered as human ships delivered the news of their oppressors' defeat. The Valdorians, who had paid tribute to the Empire for generations, declared a day of thanksgiving. Their children would grow up in a galaxy where Zephyrian cruelty was just a memory. Even species that had never directly suffered under Zephyrian rule felt relief. The execution of Danny Martinez had shown everyone what the Empire really thought of other forms of life. Now that threat was gone forever, but for humanity, the victory felt hollow. They had won the war, but they could not bring back the boy whose death had started it all. Carlos and Maria Martinez stood in the courtroom on Earth, where Commander Veltar and his fellow war criminals faced judgment. The alien who had ordered their son's execution looked smaller now. Dressed in prison clothes instead of his military uniform, the trial had lasted 6 months. Evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and the galaxy learned the full truth about what had happened aboard the Zephyrian ship. Dominion's Edge video recordings showed Commander Veltar choosing Danny's name from a list, ordering the execution, and broadcasting it to the galaxy as entertainment. Judge Harrison, the Chief Justice of the Human Supreme Court, read the verdict in a voice that carried to every world in human space. "Commander Veltar, you have been found guilty of murder in the 1st degree. Crimes against humanity and genocide against human children. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Veltar was led away in chains, along with the other Zephyrians who had participated in Danny's execution. They would spend the rest of their lives in human prisons, thinking about the boy they had killed and the empire they had destroyed, but punishment was not enough for humanity. President Carter stood before the new Galactic Assembly, the organization that had replaced the old power structures dominated by the Zephyrian Empire. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered to hear her speak. "The murder of Danny Martinez showed us what can happen when civilized beings allow cruelty to be called justice," she said. "Today we establish new laws to ensure that No child of any species will ever again face what Danny faced. The Danny Martinez Accords were signed by every major power in the galaxy. The laws were simple but absolute. Any government that harmed children would face immediate intervention by the galactic community. Any military force that targeted civilians would be considered an enemy of all civilized species. Most importantly, humanity would serve as the enforcement arm of these new laws. Human warships would patrol the galaxy, watching for signs of the kind of cruelty that the Zephyrians had shown. The species that had once been seen as peaceful traders was now the galaxy's guardian. Dr. Susan Wright stood in her laboratory, looking at weapons that would never be used. The terrible devices she had created to fight the Zephyrians were being dismantled and stored away. Humanity had proven its point. Now it was time to build rather than destroy. "Doctor," asked her assistant, as they worked to deactivate a Nova weapon, "what happens to all this technology now?" Wright thought about the question as she sealed away devices that could destroy entire star systems. "We keep it safe," she said finally, "and we pray we never need to use it again." The former Zephyrian worlds were in chaos. Some declared independence and tried to form new governments. Others fell into civil war as different factions fought for control. A few asked to join the human sphere of influence, hoping for protection and stability. Captain Steve Adams found himself governing the planet Zelkor, a former Zephyrian colony world with 30 million inhabitants. The people there were not Zephyrians, but members of conquered species who had lived under alien rule for centuries. "Captain," said the local leader, an insect-like being named Clichter, "our people want to know if we are truly free now." Adams looked out over the city where beings of a dozen different species worked together for the first time in their lives. "You're free," he said. "And if anyone tries to take that freedom away, they'll have to go through us first." The Zephyrian homeworld became a monument to the consequences of cruelty. Human forces maintained order while the surviving Zephyrian population struggled to understand how their mighty empire had fallen so completely. Many of them, especially the young, began to question the beliefs that had led to their destruction. Velanara was a young Zephyrian who had been a student when the war began. She watched the human soldiers in her city and could not understand why they treated her people with kindness instead of the cruelty she had been taught to expect from enemies. "Why don't you hate us?" she asked Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the human peacekeepers. Kim looked at the young alien and saw fear and confusion in her eyes. "Because hate is what started this war," she replied. "We're here to make sure it ends with us." The New Horizon colony ship finally reached its destination at Kepler 442b. The families who had survived the Zephyrian attack built their new homes under the protection of human warships. The colony was named Danny's Rest in memory of the boy who had died to save them. Carlos and Maria Martinez chose not to join the colony. Instead, they returned to Earth and established the Danny Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting children throughout the galaxy. Their son's death had changed the balance of power among the stars, but they wanted to ensure that his memory would bring life and hope rather than war and destruction. The Foundation's first project was a school on the former Zephyrian homeworld, where children of all species learned together. Human teachers worked alongside alien educators to create a new generation that would never repeat the mistakes of the past. Admiral Morrison retired from active duty but remained as an advisor to the new Galactic Defense Force. He spent his time writing the official history of the war, trying to explain how the death of one 8-year-old boy had brought down an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years. "The Zephyrians made one fatal error," he wrote in his memoirs. "They assumed that humanity was like every other species they had conquered. They thought we would accept injustice if it was dressed up as law. They thought we would watch our children die and call it the price of peace. They were wrong. Humanity had spent millions of years learning to protect our young from predators. When the Zephyrians threatened human children, they became predators. And humanity remembered how to deal with predators." 5 years after the war ended, a new colony ship left Earth. The vessel was named Danny's Dream, and it carried 10,000 colonists to establish humanity's furthest settlement from home. The ship was escorted by the most advanced defense fleet in the galaxy. In the ship's memorial hall hung a portrait of Danny Martinez, along with his final words, "Please don't hurt my mom and dad, I forgive you." Below the portrait was a plaque, with a simple message, in memory of all children who deserve to grow up free from fear. Never again, the galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity would explore the stars, trade with alien species, and build new worlds among distant suns. But they would do it as guardians as well as explorers. The species that had once been seen as harmless traitors was now known as the protector of the innocent, and in the vast darkness between the stars, predators looked for easier prey. Because everyone now knew what happened when you threatened a human child, the answer was simple and final. Humanity would cross any distance, pay any price, and fight any enemy to keep their children safe. Danny Martinez had died alone and afraid, on an alien ship, but his death had ensured that no other child would ever face the same fate. Some prices are paid in full, and some lessons are written in blood.